Hi, my name's Nick Haig. I'm an Anglican priest and the vicar of the parishes of Fernhurst, Linchmere and Camelsdale here in West Sussex in the UK. And this week I'm going to start with a question. What is the church for now? What is the church for now? Now that's not an invitation to get all theological, and don't worry, I'm not going to dive into the depths of theology or philosophy or anything like that, but I do want to ask the question, why? Because we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the, is it third lockdown here in the UK? We've got a world that's, well, divided and in trouble all around us. The climate issues have never been more important, and people are starting to say, well, what religion for? Isn't it dangerous? We've seen sort of far right-wing religion inflame riots, it seems, in the USA recently, and Christianity here in the UK, particularly the Church of England, has had its vocal critics. What's the church for then? What sense are we to make of it as a whole, as a national church perhaps, but what sense also are we to make of it as a local church? What do we do? That's the question that I'm always interested in. Never mind all the theology, all the politics. The question for me is always, what does that mean for me here, now? And I think that's the real sense behind my question. What sense do we make of it? Now, I've come across an interesting quote recently. It's from the writings of Rachel Held Evans, who died about 18 months ago. She was aged 37, but wrote some profound stuff in her time as a Christian author and blogger. This is what she said. Most people I know aren't looking for religion that answers all of their questions, but rather a community of faith in which they feel safe to ask them. Most people I know aren't looking for a religion that answers all of their questions, but rather a community of faith in which they feel safe to ask them. I think that's brilliant. And it chimes with the sense that I feel that we are in this together, exploring what it means together. The trouble with organised religion is that too often it seems to want to be definite about what's right and what's wrong, who's in and who's out. This is a tricky area to talk about, of course, because for some people, if you start asking those questions, they feel immediately threatened and unsafe. But I think we can ask them in safety here. I've come across another quote recently. Religion is humanity's way of trying to understand that which is beyond our understanding. Faith is a gift from God. Religion is humanity's way of trying to understand that which is beyond our understanding. Faith is a gift from God. And while we may feel far away from God, in the midst of difficulty, as I talked about last week, it's difficult to pray, it's difficult to find God somewhere, all seems dark around. We have to understand that faith comes from Him, and what we call organised religion is very often something that human beings have organised, I hope with divine inspiration, but sometimes, yeah, it's a bit top heavy, isn't it? So how do we create a community which is safe, a place where people feel safe to ask questions? Some people are frightened by those sort of questions. They want to be either right or wrong. But the reality is that it's actually arrogant to stand up and claim that you or somebody else has all the answers to all our questions from a faith point of view, because nobody can have. Because God is beyond and above all of that. He's beyond our understanding. I wish more people were honest about that. And so honesty is the starting point. We're all searching for God and for meaning, we look to Holy Scripture to guide us, and there the truth is to be found. There is where the sense of faith being all important comes. Faith is a gift of God. You are saved by grace through faith, writes the Apostle Paul to the church in Ephesus, which is in modern day Turkey. And if I were to sum up all of Paul's teachings, it would perhaps be that all that matters is faith expressed through love. That was what Paul was passionate about, faith expressed through practical love. So there's the context. There's the context for us to work on in terms of a faith community, wherever we are, in which people feel safe to ask questions because it's a community of love that looks to God for guidance and holds all their questions before Him as they go. It's a good time for us as a church now to think about what really does matter. But I think this is so important. It's absolutely central to who we are and what we believe and the person, Christ, Jesus, to be manifested, to be made real, in other words, among us. And I'm going to end with the story. So I hope you're sitting comfortably. But even if you aren't, I'm going to begin. Once upon a time, there was a monastery. And the monastery had once been great. It had a long history. It was very old, started in medieval times. It was now a shadow of its former self. A very fraction of the monks that it used to have. It used to have hundreds. And the abbot was really quite depressed. He was down. He was in despair, actually. Finances were difficulty. The threat of closure was hanging over the monastery. Monks were getting disillusioned, starting to leave. What was he to do? He talked to his superiors about it, but apart from sage nods and sympathetic sort of pats on the back, they had no real answers. What to do? Then he had some inspiration. It was a long shot, to be sure, but there was living a few miles away a hermit in a shack in the woods. He was a bit wild and woolly and off the grid in all sorts of ways, but people did go to him. They said he heard from God. He could speak wisdom. Yeah, but they decided that there was nothing to lose. He would go and see him. So he made the journey and he approached the shack in the woods, and when he was some distance off he heard a shout from inside the shack. "I've been waiting for you!" He approached the shack further, and then suddenly in the doorway appeared this dishevelled figure. Wild and woolly hair, COVID lockdown hair obviously, and the figure fixed the abbot with his piercing blue eyes and stared at him for a long time. And then he said abruptly, "God has a message for you. Jesus is one of you. He is living among you." And with that he whirled and disappeared into his shack and shut the door with a bang. Well, the abbot was confused, surprised. He wasn't expecting this, perhaps a difficult encounter, but nothing like this. So he turned slowly, then went back to the monastery, and as he walked he thought. And by the time he got back to the monastery he'd made up his mind he had to share it with the brothers to see what they would make of it. And so he sat them all down in the chapter house and he told them the story of his encounter with the hermit. God was one of them. Jesus was one of them. And to his surprise, they didn't throw him out of court. They didn't say, "Well, that's ridiculous, the bloke's a lunatic." They took it seriously. And they all bent their heads and looked into their folded arms, folded in the sleeves of their cassocks, and they thought about what to do about it, and in fact who it might be. And as they departed in silence, the discussions kept going on. In the kitchen, while they were at work, in the garden, little conversations. Who was it? Perhaps it's Brother Phineas. He spends hours and hours in prayer. He's really, really inspirational on that front. It's got to be him. He's got to be Jesus living amongst us. But actually, no, hang on. It can't be him. It's the drink, you see. There's a real problem there. Jesus turned gallons and gallons of water into wine, but he didn't drink all of it personally. That can't be right. Can't be Phineas. Perhaps it's Brother Aidan. He seems to have so much spiritual power. He prays for sick people and they get better. Wonderful. Has words of God for people. But actually, no, it can't be him either. Because, well, sometimes he seems to enjoy praying for the ladies a bit too much. In fact, young pretty ladies, we have to sometimes intervene. No, it can't be Brother Aidan. Maybe it's Brother Thomas. He's really holy. His life is so, well, faultless, really. Got to be him, really. When he goes to confessional, he has trouble thinking of anything to confess. That's maybe Jesus. Except, well, he's really boring. That can't be right. Can't be Brother Thomas. Maybe it's Brother Oswald. He's really got a heart for social justice, really motivated by compassion. Yeah, that's just like Jesus, isn't it? Caring for the poor and the needy and the downtrodden. Except, well, we sort of try and avoid him because, well, he smells. Personal hygiene is well, it's a real issue for him. Soap is a 4-letter word. It can't be him. It's got to be Brother Luke, hasn't it? Brother Luke knows the Bible backwards. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Jesus was called the living word. Maybe it's Brother Luke. Except, well, to be honest, he's really annoying. He's always right. There are two ways of interpreting the Bible, his way and the wrong way. Personal relationships come way down on his list of priorities after right doctrine. No, Jesus was really relational. It couldn't be him. Well, maybe it's Brother Barnabas. He sees God in everything. Yeah, sacramental. He doesn't have any sort of division between the sacred and the secular. Everything is a means of God speaking. That makes sense, doesn't it? Well, it makes sense for him to be Jesus if you ignore one thing, and that's, well, the language. That's fruity to say the least. He shouldn't be allowed to speak before the 9 o'clock watershed. If we had a swear box, he'd pay for the heating bill personally. And his jokes, well, they're funny, but we have to go to confessional afterwards to confess the sin of even listening to them. No, it can't be him. And so the discussions went on and round and round, and they just couldn't decide which one of them was Jesus. So they made the only decision they possibly could. They decided that the only course of action was to treat every brother in the community as if they were the Lord, to be on the safe side. And so that's what they did. And gradually, imperceptibly at first, things started to improve. The community got a new sense of cohesion and purpose. The financial worries reduced. things got better and better. There was a sense of common purpose. And people started making inquiries about joining this monastery. For the first time in years, the Master of Novices had some work to do. And some years afterwards, there was an old man who visited the village. He was in fact one of the monks who had resigned when things were bad. And he was puzzled, because there were lots of people in the village. It had a new sense of purpose itself. And groups of people were steadily making their way up the hill towards the monastery from the village. And he said to the person who brought him his coffee as he sat in a roadside bistro, he said, "What's going on? Is there some sort of special event, something happening today?" No, it's just an ordinary day." He said, "Well, all the people going to the monastery, what's that about then?" "Oh, haven't you heard?" said the person. "That monastery's a really special place. It's as if God lives there." I'll see you next week.